This is Canada, home to 10 provinces and 3 territories. And today we're going to talk about each one's provincial capital building. In the first episode of this series, we've already gone through 7 different provincial capitals. And in episode 2 here, we're going to finish them out. What we're doing is simply giving a brief history and some facts about each provincial capital building, and then giving it a score. 10 being awesome, 5 being average, and 1 being the lowest possible score you can get. So each score is going to be ranked purely on the exterior of the building, not the inside. So keep that in mind. YouTube says 99.8% of people who watch our videos aren't subscribed, so let's change that, because that's horrible. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below, hit the bell for notifications, and we also have a Patreon if you want to support us monetarily. And lastly, share our content with everyone you know. Everyone. It's time for Canadian Provincial Capitals Scored and Territories, Episode 2. Next, we have the Legislative Building of Nunavut, located in Iqaluit. We are in some remote country here, folks. And because of the super harsh climate, they had to make a building withstand that super harsh climate. And because of its super remote location, it is extremely hard to get supplies and materials, let alone construction crews up there. There's no road. This building was designed by a Canadian architectural firm named Arcop, who shortly went out of business afterward. The 3-story building is made of wood and features lots of glass to allow in lots of light. This especially helps in the super dark winters where the sun doesn't show up for days. Okay, months. Construction began in May of 1998 and was completed in September of 1999. Interestingly enough, the building is not owned by the territorial government of Nunavut, but it's actually owned by an investment group. The government actually leases the building to use it. So how much did this building cost, you ask? Oh my goodness. Now remember, it's in a remote location, supplies are hard to get, and workers cost a lot. It cost $390 million. Anyways, the building is lifted above the ground so snow can go underneath it. The entrance is small, but that's kind of how it is. And it's interesting how they sort of have a curved shape around the building. The interior has some neat aspects to it, as well as the exterior, but I can't say it's $390 million cool. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. The Ontario Legislative Building is located just outside of downtown Toronto, on land owned by the University of Toronto. As a matter of fact, it's surrounded by the university. Originally, the government had to pay $1 per year for this land. And what land it is beautifully located right here within Queen's Park. This 5-story asymmetrical legislative building was built in the Richardsonian Romanesque style, complete with gargoyles, stone carvings, and grotesques. This particular style incorporates a lot of 11th and 12th century French, Spanish, and Italian Romanesque characteristics. It became very popular in the 1870s and onward, especially through the northeast United States. And as you can see here, it's spread into Canada. The architect chosen for the building was American Richard A. Waite, who did tons of buildings throughout the northeast US, as well as in Canada. He made sure to incorporate as many Canadian-made materials as possible. And one of those Canadian materials is Ontario sandstone, which has a pink hue. That pink hue can sometimes be seen on the Ontario Legislative Building, and people often call it the Pink Palace. As well, the 10.5 million bricks on this building were made by prison inmates in Ontario. The final cost was a little over $1.2 million. They originally wanted it to be under $500,000, then they saw that that was impossible, so they raised it to $750,000, and well, they certainly got what they paid for, because this building is immaculate, especially on the inside. Construction was started in 1886, and people were allowed to start working inside of it in 1893. It wasn't officially completed until 1909. And upon completion, a very, very small minority criticized the building, saying it was too American, whatever that means. I couldn't even find a legit source for this claim, so take it with a grain of salt. As for the building, it's absolutely beautiful, made even more beautiful with its location within Queen's Park and excellent views of the Toronto skyline. I want to give this building a 10, even a 9, but I just can't. I'm giving it an 8 because it's not symmetrical. The east wing and the west wing are completely different. One side has the framed windows and roofline, the other side has a pyramid shape. And that's simply because a different architect came along later and added a different style wing to one side. That architect was Canadian architect E.J. Lennox. Why didn't he just follow the same wing pattern as the other side? It would have been beautiful if symmetrical. So because of that, I can't give it a higher score than 8. It's an absolutely gorgeous building, don't get me wrong, but symmetry is pretty important here. The other symmetry nitpick is from the original design itself, where one of the central towers has a circular window while the other side has a balcony. Still, this historic building is absolutely awesome. Wonderful location. Queen's Park itself is worth a visit. Province House, located in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, is very similar to Province House in Nova Scotia, mainly the architecture and style. It is Canada's second oldest seat of government. Construction started in 1843 and ended in 1847. The architect was Isaac Smith from Yorkshire, England. Being located on an island off the mainland, they had to make do with what they had, and it was built mostly just by people on the island. Local craftsmen. Upon completion, it cost about 16,500 Canadian dollars. Sadly, Province House was closed in 2015 for repairs and conservation, meaning that the provincial legislature had to move to a different location. Though when repairs and conservation is done, they plan to move back to Province House. Their original goal was 2022, but that didn't happen. It's a nice little building with shaded grounds. It actually reminds me of like a courthouse or something. I like it, but not as much as Nova Scotia's building. Very similar in design. You can also see this building is pretty worn in locations. I'm kind of surprised the condition it is in some photos. I don't know if it's worth a whole point drop from Nova Scotia's. Okay, yes it is. It's a whole point drop. And another couple more points drop because it's just so dirty looking. It's still under renovation in 2023, even though it was supposed to be done in 2022. Hopefully it'll all look better when it's done. It's getting a 4 out of 10. Located outside the walls of Old Quebec, we have the Quebec Parliament Building, used today by the National Assembly of Quebec. This 8-story building was built from the need that the government needed more space. They chose a French architect who, surprise surprise, made a French Renaissance design, and in 1877 construction started. The construction process was marred with controversy. There were at least 4 different workers' strikes. During one of the strikes, the workers went on a riot through the city streets and the military had to be called in. And to make it more eventful, in 1884, a bomb went off at the construction site of the building. I don't know if the person who planted the bomb was ever caught, but it definitely caused damage to the construction project. Not only that, but the building that the government was working in actually caught on fire, so they didn't really have a place to, do government stuff for a while. After all of that, this building was finished in 1886, and it went way over budget. In fact, it was so over budget they didn't want to release that information. And they didn't. But my goodness, look at this building. It's absolutely gorgeous. 10 out of 10, no questions about it. Absolutely love it. It looks like something you'd see in Paris. The ornate details, the design, the statuary, even the ironwork. It looks fantastic. The grounds are pretty as well. And how I said that's kind of an understatement because the grounds are actually beautiful. The ornate details, the roofing, the design work around the windows, the colors even. It's just an absolutely gorgeous building. No doubt in my mind, it earns a 10 out of 10. Magnifique! Mwah! Regina is home to the legislative building of Saskatchewan. Clearly, the building was placed to be prominent in the city. Having its own legislative grounds and government complex around it, it's definitely one of the most thought-out complexes in all of Canada, mimicking how many American state capitals set up their buildings and capitol grounds. Construction started in August of 1909 and was completed in January of 1912. The building came in at a cost of $1.7 million. The architects were Edward and William Maxwell, both prominent Canadian architects in their own right. Saskatchewan's premier, Walter Scott at the time, had a lot of say in how the building would be designed, even choosing Manitoba limestone over the original planned red brick. He thought the limestone would look more grand. They also made everything supersized, because the premier also predicted that in the future Saskatchewan would be home to millions and millions of people. So in doing so, the legislative chamber itself actually has seating for 125 members, even though in the current day it's only in the 60s. But like many places, they had faith that their region would grow and exceed boundaries, so they planned everything for the future and made things big. And it shows, because this place is really pretty. You get awesome views of the capital from so many different angles, including the Legislative Mall, as well as from across the lake. Looking directly from the front, it has a very important looking entryway, some nice Greek looking columns under the portico, and the wings are done well because even though they're flat, they have a visually interesting aspect at each end, being those other columns that somewhat stick out. The dome, while maybe not the most impressive, is a very nice looking dome, and just the landscaping itself, even with the 2 trees in front, make it look very nice. Overall, I give this building an 8 out of 10. When you drive into downtown Whitehorse, you're gonna drive right by the Yukon Legislative Building. And honestly, many might just overlook it and think it's a police station, a city hall, maybe a library or a school. But no, it's the Territorial Administrative Building, the Capitol. The building was built sometime in the 1970s before the territorial government moved in 1976. It's a 3-story building and it's clad in steel. There are no Capitol grounds, but there are parking lots around it. In 2021 and 2022, there have been slight renovations to the building to modernize it. As for the building's score, unfortunately, this is probably the worst in Canada. As I said before, it looks just like a municipal building. I'm going to have to give it a 2 out of 10. There is nothing here, it's forgettable. Nothing about this building represents what the Yukon Territory is. There's just nothing to this building. Originally, I wasn't going to rank Parliament Hill since it's a federal government building and all the buildings there are federal. But we're going to do it real quick here as sort of a little bonus. The architect for Parliament Hill was American Calvert Vaux, the same gentleman who helped landscape and design Central Park in New York City. The buildings surrounding Center Block, the main parliamentary building, were also designed by different architects, American Thomas Stent and Canadian Augustus Laver. They ended up going with a Gothic architecture to be different from that from the United States' Republican neoclassicism design on the US Capitol, which was more Roman in appeal. Construction started in 1859 with the bulk of it ending in 1876, and this isn't without a whole bunch of incidents such as fires and discovering bedrock way sooner than they expected, but nonetheless, we have this absolutely beautiful complex of buildings, and I'm just kinda rate them all as 1. I mean, come on, it's a 10 out of 10. How could you not say that these are some of the most magnificent buildings in the country? And there we go, a good way to end this series with a 10 out of 10. We just got done scoring provincial capital buildings across Canada. I hope you enjoyed going through these legislative buildings and provincial capitals with me as much as I enjoyed sharing them with you. We got to see some truly stunning buildings as well as some complete stinkers. But more importantly, I actually look forward to seeing what your opinions are in the comments. I can't wait to read them. As well, please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I hope you have a great day. See you next time. This was Canadian Provincial Capitals Scored.